Okay. Okay, guys, in this session, we mentioned that we're going to look at structuring the use case model and then also developing user interface prototypes. Have you looked at the material yet? Okay, what does it mean to structure a use case model? Let's go back. What is a use case model? Or use case diagram? I think some of you are feeling like that guy. You're lost, eh? Okay, so what is the point about the use case diagram? Use case diagrams tell us what? The use cases, the system boundary, the actors interacting with the use cases. Okay, what is the point about structuring? If you review this, you will see structuring talks about factoring out common behavior or parts of a use case to make new use cases. Okay. To, in essence, to make it easier to understand, because sometimes you may have complex steps in a use case. So can we say it's like modifying it? The previous ones, yes. If the use case initially was like to log in, and as part of login, we go to an ATM, you put in your card, you put in your PIN, it sends you an SMS. That's login, to authenticate. But that whole logic about sending an SMS, is it repeated in the ATM system? What about withdrawing of funds? What about transfer of funds? Does it not send you an SMS again? Okay, so can we restructure our diagram? So what you'll see from the bullets, it tells us to simplify the original use cases, as you mentioned now, to make it easier. Okay, so what do we mean by that? It makes our initial diagram easier to understand because it sometimes breaks use cases down into smaller portions. Then to make it easier to maintain, because now you can have a use case which is just related to a particular function or feature which you're working with. Then also to possibly to reuse some of the requirements. As I mentioned now, to send an SMS, an email. Those are features which is used over and over sometimes. Where just the formatting, what you display in your SMS changes, but the fact that you're still sending an SMS stays the same. Okay, guys, so the components you will see which we get in this is the following. We have an include use case, and there's a possibility of an extend use case and also generalization. Generalization, you've probably reviewed in programming. It's the easiest one. What is generalization? It is inheritance, yes. Where some use case is inheriting features from another use case also. Okay. Then we also have include and extend. Now, if we look at those quickly, so an include use case looks like that. It means that we have a base use case, which is our main use case still, but at some point it's going to call on features of which is in another use case. Okay. That is always going to happen. It doesn't mean that it's optional or anything like that. Now, what is the difference between this guy and an extend use case? Does this one allow you to make options in the base use case? No. It is going to do it. Doesn't matter what happens, it is going to do it. There's an example where they say to us, but when we start through this base use case, it ultimately at one point it just jumps to the other use case and then it goes back to the base use case. Okay. But what we are seeing if we perform something like an extend is conditional based. So we have some options. It is going to be performed when our testing conditions is true. So in our use case specification, we have a portion that was extended behavior. And in there, we can then mention this and say, but we are calling on functionality which is in another use case. Okay. So ultimately, we can create a structure that looks something like this. We can still have our actors, we can have our use cases, and in our use cases, we can have include and extend relationships, where the extended ones now adds additional optional behavior to our base use case. So here they're showing to us just an example where we actually have an extension point, and in our base use case, it says to us, but there's some optional feature which is being performed in another use case. So in our base use case, we would have had a point where this is then said to us, but we are calling on some feature which is in another use case. Okay. So if the base use case was authenticate, at some point it would say to us, if it needs to send an SMS, it will call on and invoke the send SMS use case. Okay. Yes.
You say that the extend one and include one, the include one cannot change anything in the base, right?
Okay, just to state it this way, both the include and extend is use cases on its own. The main difference is the include use case is going to be included. When it reaches that point in the base use case, it is going to be included. Doesn't matter what happens. The extend one means that if it reaches that point in the base use case and it matches the conditions which is set, then it will call on the extend use case and perform that one. Okay. So guys, there's a bit of a diagram where they're saying to us, but we can go through our base use case and then at some point we can make a decision. And if the decision is going to be true, then we're going to jump out to our base, to extend use case and then jump back. Or if the condition does not matches our stated criteria, then we can just continue through our use case. Okay. So why do we do this? Why do we use an extended relationship? There's a mention about this. If we have optional or extended behavior that is done on some condition, okay, why do we have stereotypes? In life, why do we have stereotypes? Why do we group people? Do we group people? Yes, we do. But why do we do it? Common and distinctive behavior and things that make us different. If we look at a system and we look at our use cases, we can do the same. We are creating use cases later on, include and extend use case based on some common behavior. Initially, when you're just designing this, you're just looking at the bigger picture, getting all the use cases. But when you go through it and you start to get to the detail of each use case, you can start to see, but there is a bit of overlap from this use case to another use case. Okay, so that's a place where you will have include and extend use cases. He's also mentioned about concrete and abstract use cases, where a concrete use case is, for example, our options B and C. They are the base use cases in the diagram. They cannot change. They are there. Now, the abstract use cases can be changed and changed into something else even. for example, circle the A and D, which is the include use case and extend use case, can be changed later on. You can create another version of that use case. If you design a system, sometimes you will realize, but this classes we place in here is nice, and a few months or years go past, but you would like to create a new version of this. So then you don't just replace all the classes, you just add them in all of that. So it's a way of doing it for us. So there's also mention about why should we not structure the model, because in one case it decomposes our requirements. If you decompose it too much, you can later on have too many use cases, and it becomes small, almost meaningless use cases. Okay, it decreases the understandability. If you have a use case diagram with a lot of these include and extend lines going, it becomes confusing. It thereby increases the complexity, and it becomes a lot more difficult for you to go through and to create even. So later on you can even get to actor generalization or generalization. Why do we have actor generalization in a diagram? Is everyone always doing the same thing on a use case? No. So sometimes we can get to a place, but we say for some of the things, our main actors are all logging in. If we take, for example, ITS, does everybody sign into ITS? Who doesn't sign into ITS? Does everybody use the use case login or authenticate to sign into ITS? Yes, all the users. But do they have different functionality and features when they are logged in? Okay. I can give you marks. Can you give yourself marks? Okay, so is there differences? Okay, so you can review your marks. So one of the use cases you may do is to review your marks. What I might do is to enter your marks. Okay, so that is a place for actor generalization. So that is really what they're trying to give you in this example, where they're saying to us, but we have different people working with doctor, nurse, and aide. All of them are considered as medical workers, but only the doctor may schedule an operation, and the nurse and aide and the doctor, all of them can read a chart. So they generalize into medical workers, so the medical worker can read the chart. Okay, so there's also mention about why do we use this. So you can review that. Okay, guys, any questions about structuring? Not at this point, I see. Okay. Then the second portion for this week is to design and prototype a user interface. What does that mean? What is a prototype? Is a prototype always an actual thing, a product? Is a prototype always a product, a final thing? No. It can even be a diagram. So we can go to some white space, some paper, and we can start to model it. Does it mean that we need to have software and IDE to create the user interface? Someone who tends to programming a lot tend to jump there because their brain always think already in that place. But if you show a customer, this is what I'm going to develop, and you give them the screenshots from what you've already created in the IDE, that's what they are going to expect. And if you now cannot do it, all the functionality in that thing, what then? Then they are angry at you. But what happens if you just say to them, we would like to give you a prototype, and you say to the person, this is what it must be doing. A prototype can also become a paper, a document, because it's a lot easier to discuss the document, and it's quicker to change a piece of paper than it's what it's going to be to change code, if that code needs to be changed. Okay. So you can then write in the information in there and say, this is what needs to happen. Okay. Any questions, guys? If you look at a use case, where can we find the requirements? Where can we find what is needed for our user interface? Inside the use case specification, what is said there? Sometimes it may say to us, the system displays the information. If it's going to be doing that, what does it mean? It also needs to retrieve it from somewhere. It's getting this information. It's putting it for us on some form of a screen. Okay. If you had to design a user interface for a login, what would you display? Let's say you had to log in to an ATM. What would you display? Okay, so we need to have the PIN. What else? Is it? Okay. So the card is the actual thing that you may need. What do you need to display to this person on the screen? What options? Keep in mind that the use case is just there to authenticate. So on the ATM, here's our ATM space. There's our user interface. What are you going to ask the person? Okay, so the first one may be enter card. Is it part of the authenticate use case? That's a bit debatable because that's something that needs to happen actually outside of this use case. What would start the use case to authenticate? Actually, the entering of your card. makes a check. Can we actually ask this person for the criteria? What happens if you put your card the wrong way around in? Can you put it the wrong way around in? It just returns it to you. It happened to me last week where I've entered my card, but I've realized after I put it in, oh, it's the wrong way. So I didn't press anything, but it ejected the card, and I had to insert it correctly. Okay, so the moment you enter the card, that is considered as part of the authentication process. So it starts. Okay, so on this interface, what will you ask the person? No, you already inserted his card. You're starting this use case now. You're inside the use case. Enter your PIN. What options does a person have on that screen? No. To cancel. To continue. Are we busy designing the user interface? Yes. Okay. That is what we're busy doing at this point. So he can cancel, he can continue from it. Does this help us later on when we're designing the system? Yes, because now it also tells us how many classes do I need to capture this, or to play the role of my boundary class. How many classes for our boundary class did we identify in analysis when we're doing use case analysis? Normally one. But what are we doing at this point is we're expanding this. Okay. Any questions, guys? I cannot always tell you, and I cannot precisely tell you how is the specification going to look, how are you going to translate it to paper. Sometimes we have to be very creative in our design to say, what are you going to actually have? Okay. It's also a bit of a creative process to create a user interface. Not to the extent of adding butterflies and effects there. Okay. We have seen that people create user interfaces with butterflies or excessive colors and so on. It is just distracting from the final product. Okay. Any questions? Are you able to create a user interface? Are you able to draw it on paper? No, all of us are not artists. Huh? It doesn't always feel nice to draw because we're not comfortable with it. Okay, but everybody can draw a diagram like that. It's not meant to be looking perfect. Okay. Guys, so as part of this week, you will be focusing on the mentioned models, on structuring the use case model, and then also to create user interface prototypes. Any questions on them? Okay. You must enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for your time.